Hi, my name is Bethany Mandel and I'm here with the Jewish Charlotte Mason Homeschooling, and I wanted to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about morning time. You'll notice on my channel there's going to be two kinds of videos. More formal videos that are produced, and there's informal videos that I'm sneaking in while my baby is napping. This is one of the latter ones. I love talking about morning time because it's one of my favorite things about our homeschool. And it's something that we didn't start really using until mid-year last year, and I noticed how much our homeschool improved when we started doing it. So what is morning time? So it's basically a time for us to have a morning meeting, basically, and to knock out sort of the rich subjects that that the whole family can do. My 3-year-old to my 6-year-old, and moving forward in future years, it will be something that we can all sort of do together. There's a lot of subjects in our homeschool and in homeschool in general that you can do as a family. You don't need to have a line of 3 or 4 or 5 kids, everyone doing different things all day, because that would be exhausting and you'd never get anything done. So it's advantageous, in my opinion, to choose as much as possible that can be done together. And that's what we do during our morning time. So generally speaking, I put the baby down for a nap in the morning, and then we sit down as the rest of the people who are able to talk, and we do morning time. And I wanted to show you what our morning time plan looked like last year. So every day we did these things. First thing we did was say the morning prayer. We said Moda Ani, which is basically saying thank you to God for giving us this day. The next thing we did was listen to a song. The song varied every day. I chose last year to do a Jewish song every day, which is not something I think I would continue in the years to come, because I don't want to just do hymns, but I want to do folk songs, and there's a lot of songs out there. The next thing we did was just read a poem, which was a little bit too random, but I took all of our poem readings out of this book, Favorite Poems, Old and New. This is an old standby that a lot of homeschoolers use. In the comments, I'm always going to link to the resources that I'm mentioning, and so don't feel like you have to write everything down. The next thing we did was do recitation. Recitation is a really interesting topic. In the notes, I'm also going to link to a podcast that a woman recorded who's become sort of an expert on recitation. My favorite sort of anecdote about recitation, which is basically you just recite the same thing over and over every day. And so every day we recited something else. And by the end of the term, my oldest at least, and sometimes my second oldest, had memorized it. And I think about, the movie with Winston Churchill, I can't remember the name, but there was a scene on the subway where Winston starts reciting a poem, and everyone on the subway knew that poem because they had done recitation in school, and they had learned sort of this breadth of material that we don't have memorized, except for it's kind of sad. You think about it, in previous generations, people could recite great poems or pieces of sort of, really it was poems. That was what our grandparents and older, that's what they learned how to recite. Now, what can you say from memory? The Cars for Kids jingle, right? It's awful. I'm not going to sing it for you, because then you'll have it in your head. But that's the things that are in our heads, and I think that that's disturbing. So I wanted to sort of fill my kids' heads with beautiful things and things of value and meaning, and not just the Cars for Kids song, which I'm sure they'll learn anyway. There's no escaping it. It's so bad. It's a scam, by the way. Anyway, Google it. The next thing we did was a bracha, which is a blessing. And so we learned the blessings over food. This was something that I was super overwhelmed by, and because I didn't learn this stuff in school. And so I was like, how do I teach the blessings over food? And it's really, foods are categorized by fruits, vegetables, they all have different blessings. And I was amazed that, so we used just this silly board book. And I was amazed by the end of the year that even my 3-year-old, and we started when he was 2, he knows. Like if I put a piece of cheese in front of him, he's like, shahakol. And I'm like, dang, boy. I put an apple in front of him, he's like, ha-8s. And like, does he always get it right? Of course not. But my older 2 kids almost always get it right now. And it was, so what I did was, every day I chose a different food and tried to like mix it up the best I could. And we talked about sort of how is it made or where's it grown, and that sort of helped them categorize the foods. And there's so much logic in Orthodox Judaism, and teaching kids this early, the categorization of food and how it's grown and where it's made, and that is incredibly valuable in and of itself outside of learning the blessings. So anyway, so we did the bracha every day. The next thing we did was read. I found that we were running around so much that I wasn't reading enough. So we do a bedtime story every night for about 20 minutes. But I wanted to have more reading out loud in our homeschool. It's something that I do in our curriculum, but I wanted to do it with my boys as well. So every day I sort of tried to choose a different sort of book to read. So last year, a lot of what we read was myths and fables from Native Americans. And so we made our way through a huge volume actually of anthologies of Native American stories. And it was really impactful and interesting. We also made our way through the stories that one Jewish generation tells another. It's a book that I mentioned here previously. And then we just looked at a calendar and talked about what day it is, because it's one of those things that you don't realize that you actually have to teach, because learning the days of the week and the months and the years and that sort of chronology it's not intuitive. It's something that has to be taught. And so I always tried to go through the calendar, and before COVID I would say what we were doing. And then I stopped doing calendar when COVID happened, because it was too depressing to be like, it's May 23rd and we're not doing anything today, the same as yesterday. I stopped doing calendar, don't judge me. It was just became too depressing for me, because I also had like written things on it in like before times. And it was really depressing to like just cross things out and be like, we're not going to the symphony today, guys. We're not going to the zoo today, guys. And I was like, I can't do calendar anymore. This is too depressing. So anyway, next year we're going to be doing, we're following a curriculum called A Gentle Feast. We're actually going to be following cycle 2, and this is cycle 1, but whatever. She has 4 different cycles. I'm going to, in another episode, break down how we're making A Gentle Feast work for us in a Jewish family. And I'm asking her for a referral code, because why not? I have chutzpah. But she sells 2 things. So she sells curriculum guides for 4 different cycles, and every cycle is a time period. And so she sells curriculum guides for all-in-one curriculum guides, and she also sells morning time guides, which is what this is, morning time. So I wanted to go over a little bit sort of how she does morning time, and I think it's fantastic. This cycle required a lot more. I was thinking about doing the first cycle, and then I decided that we had covered so much of the material last year in our homeschool that I decided to move to cycle 2, but I bought cycle 1 already and had started planning thinking I was going to use it, and then I stopped. But anyway, this is her morning time guide. And so the day for the first day, it was like a New Testament reading, and so I was just like, let's just do the Parsha on Mondays. Tuesday, she goes through Old Testament readings, which I actually think is really valuable. So you just read like 1 chapter basically of Genesis per day, or per Tuesday. Wednesday, Bible, which is just, Psalms or Proverbs, or yeah, it's just like Psalms. Thursdays is Proverbs. And the Friday, she said just your choice. And we decided to read Your Jewish Year Round and Round, which is, there's 4 different books. I wish I had grabbed them. But they just sort of cover different parts of the Jewish year, different months, Nisan, whatever. So just sort of talking a little bit about holidays or whatever that's going on that month. And then after you do that that first thing, every day it's different, Parsha, the next thing you do is Bible memory. And so that's recitation. And so you choose a Bible portion. The Bible portion that she had was Christian. So I crossed it off and chose Devarim, chapter 6. And so I just taped it in here and printed it out and taped it. So after that, then you do, you choose one thing from the beauty loop. So on Mondays, hymn study. So obviously I had to change that out. Then the next thing on Tuesdays, usually you do a poetry recitation. Most of those poems were not Christian, so I could use what she had in this book. The next thing is picture or composer study. It alternates either picture or composer, and so every term you have either an artist or a composer that you are studying, and so you just look at their art. And so this is just an example of an artist that we were using last year, and I just had this printed. This was when we did Alveary. We had artist study, and the thing that I really liked about the Alveary artist study, I think that they sell them a la carte, but they had women, they had men of color. It wasn't just white people, which is really nice, because that's something that happens a lot in Charlotte Mason. It's just like, oh cool, another white European from the 18th century, that's great. So that was one thing I really liked about the Alveary. But anyway, so what we would do if we had picture study that day, there's a lot of resources if you want to learn more about picture study. A Delectable Education has a great podcast on it. But what we would do is we would look at this picture and we'd say, what do you see? And I would talk to even my 2.5-year-old at the time, now he's 3, but I would talk to my 2.5-year-old and I'd say, what do you see? What colors do you see? How does it make you feel? I want you to close your eyes for a second and I want you to try to describe it. Sometimes we would, as a challenge, look at it again and then close it and try to redraw it. And it was a really great challenge. So that was how we did picture study in our homeschool last year. And for composer study, you just listen and you ask a lot of the same questions. What instruments do you think you heard? How did that make you feel? How do you think the composer was feeling? And then the next thing is poet study. She usually has that on Thursdays. I mean, it's a loop. So like if you don't get to it on Thursday, then you do it on Friday. It becomes a loop. The next thing is poet study. And it's the same thing. You study one poet the whole term and you really get to know their volume of work, which I think is better than what I did last year, which was just like picking out random poems. It wasn't meaningful. It's not something I would do again. And then the last thing, she suggests reading like tales and fables. And so a lot of the options that she lists work for a Jewish family, or at that time you could choose one of the books that I talked about in a previous episode, of all those Jewish anthology books. That's a great time to do those things. So that's basically what she has in her morning time guide, and it's basically what we're going to follow. We'll have to make alterations because, well, we'll take out the Christian stuff, but it's a really good framework. And it's easy, I think, to build a morning time sort of idea when you are just making a substitution on a poet or making a substitution for like one Bible memory that doesn't work for you, instead of like reinventing the whole wheel. And that's my philosophy in general about finding curriculum. I think it's better to not reinvent the wheel as much as possible, because homeschooling is hard enough. There's no need to make it harder. So that's what I have. I'm always going to link as many resources as I can in the comments. Please comment and subscribe and like and all of those things you're supposed to do on YouTube and that I'm still learning. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to chatting with you again soon.